G'day, in this video I would like to talk to you a little bit about why it is that we spend so much time studying chord theory on the Augmented Seventh website. I'd like to talk a little bit about the motivation and the implications of doing so. Alright, so having established our goal, let's just say that in the extreme case you may have come up with a chord progression that you're really happy with. You might not even be thinking in terms of shapes or notes. You may just have played by ear, figured out a bunch of shapes that sound good to you and cobbled it together to come up with a chord progression that you're happy with. Now, some of you may have the ability to do that, and that's fine, in fact it's great, because at the end of the day with music it's how it sounds, it's the most important thing. So if you can in fact create a chord progression that you really like and is pleasing to your ear and says what you want it to say without the use of any theory, then that's terrific. In that extreme event that may be the case, we then ask, why would we be interested in chord theory? Well, there are several reasons. The first is maybe you can't come up with a chord progression just based by ears and not using shapes or notes. The other is that once you've come up with a chord progression is that you might wish to transpose it to another key, and you may wish to know how to do that. Another reason why chord theory can be important is that you may wish to jazz the chord progression up a little bit each time you play it. You might like to comp, so to speak. So in other words, you may wish to substitute chords for chords that you've already come up with. You might like to fill with voicings, add sevenths, ninths, and so on and so forth. So chord theory can provide a basic structure and paradigm within which we can work to establish those types of movements. The most extreme reason, and certainly that which pertains to myself, why chord theory is important, is you may wish to come up with a melody, be it a vocal voice or a solo or something like that, to play over the top of your chord progression. Now, the simplest way to look at any sort of melody over a chord progression is to select the notes of the chord, and they will give you the security in your melody, and then you can colour in your solos by choosing notes which are in between those notes, and use your ear to guide you, or theory, or whatever suits you best, a combination of the two, and you can use these types of ideas. So when we talk about chord theory, we really talk about placing some structure on something and what its implications are and how it is that we can go about soloing over it. And this can be important for two reasons. One may be that you want to play really quickly. Now, if you want to play really quickly and you're playing a guitar solo over a chord progression, and that chord progression doesn't belong to a given specific key, it can seem that there's no tonal center, so to speak, to talk of. So without a tonal center, we need to come up with some sort of rules and regulations on what is the best way to approach soloing, and obviously if you're playing really quickly you're going to be going through a whole bunch of different scales or some variant of that type of idea. So with that in mind, we turn to chord theory and we look to explore it and what it means and how we can use it and what knowledge we can take from it to extend it to write a complete piece of music. With that objective in mind, on the Augmented Seventh we'll start by introducing triads, which are 3-note chords, and we'll talk about them in what are called inversions. Now, inversions simply means which note of the chord is in the bass. We'll talk about voice movement within a chord progression. We'll talk about how the top line moves, because that creates a melody in itself. So if we take a chord progression, how do the top notes move from one chord to the next? Also, how do the bass notes move from one chord to the next? Similarly, what is the internal mechanism of the notes between the top and the bottom? Is there some sort of order in which we want to move from one chord to another? Similarly, we'll discuss 7th type chords, and these will be pretty handy. We'll mostly restrict our attention to 4-note voicings, but once we do that we can then talk about how to alter and extend these to include things like altered fifths, the additional 9ths, 11ths, 13ths, and so on and so forth. So I just wanted to use this video just to introduce some of the concepts of chord theory, what its motivations are, and how we'll be approaching it. I hope that you take interest in the subject and look forward to the videos that are going to be coming up. I wish you all the best. Cheers.